Dentophobia, or odontophobia, is the fear of dentists, a common one that many face. Unlike many phobias, this fear is rooted in a very sensible line of thinking. At its most benign, a visit to a dentist involves having your mouth probed, often by a stranger. These procedures can result in great pain and require the use of anesthetics, resulting in a bleary disorientation to follow what is often a traumatic and costly experience. Dentistry has a long history of horrific practices, but today when we go to a procedure, we have to believe that we are being cared for, with only the most state-of-the-art tools and medicines to help us maintain our oral health. But what happens when the person behind the chair has something other than your teeth in mind? Today, on Scream to Screen, we examine the true story behind the dentist. Before we open up and say make sure you subscribe to The Graveyard Shift and let us know in the comments which true-life horror stories you'd like for us to cover in the future. Meet Dr. Glennon Engle, a dentist by trade, possibly a hitman, and most certainly a real-life serial killer. Engle was born February 6, 1927, the youngest of 4 children born to a U.S. airman and a loving mother. Raised in a stable middle-class home, young Glennon showed no signs of the monster he would become. His school performance was above average, and he enjoyed a healthy social life. Following his graduation from high school, Glennon enlisted in the U.S. Air Corps and would later attend Washington University in St. Louis to achieve a degree in dentistry courtesy of the GI Bill. While practicing dentistry, Engle seemed an amiable sort and was considered by many to be both handsome and charming, which led to his first marriage to Edna Ruth, a woman that would aid in at least one of Engle's many killings that would follow. The two hatched a scheme, one designed to make them both very wealthy. They would dissolve their marriage and she would wed another man. During this matrimony, she would arrange to increase her new beau's life insurance, with herself as the sole heir to that potential fortune. Engle's part, of course, would be to kill the new husband, and that is precisely what he did, shooting and ending the life of the unsuspecting newlywed, who, in 1958, was a sizable insurance payout of $58,000. The two split the profits, and even after Engle's capture and prosecution, Edna Ruth would never stand trial for lack of evidence. Several years later, he would strike again. In 1963, after securing dynamite, Engle used the explosives to blow up a business associate on a site where Engle owned a drag strip. Engle then claimed the money secured from the insurance policy of the deceased associate to later split between himself and by the wife of this victim. His next confirmed murder took place in 1976. Engle worked his charms on his dental assistant, Carmen Miranda. He convinced her to marry a gentleman by the name of Peter Holm. Agreeing to play a part in this wicked conspiracy, Carmen did just that, knowing full well that they would eventually kill him for the purpose of collecting on insurance. Once the paperwork was in order, Glennon executed Holm with one shot to the head. Miranda received a $75,000 insurance settlement. Engle reported collected $10,000 of it for his own efforts. In 1977, Engle ramped up activity in his side gig as a killer, ending the lives of an entire family, again for the purposes of collecting on the insurance payouts. The widow, now the sole family survivor, would claim the millions in life insurance she had taken out on her husband, who was, due to Engle, the sole heir of his now late parents' oil business. Engle's final confirmed murder took place in 1980. Engle finding himself in debt to the tune of $14,500 to Sophie Marie Barrera, the owner of a South St. Louis dental laboratory. Barrera would perish at the hands of the mad dentist, another victim of a car bombing. The dentist had finally done too much, and it was Barrera's death that ultimately led to the law enforcement being able to figure Glennon as the source of these bizarre killings. Police had been suspicious about the dentist for some time, but had never been able to put together a case against the crafty killer. But Engle's third wife, from whom he had tried and failed to hide his crimes, ended up turning him over to police custody. During his reign, Engle murdered no less than 7 people over a 30-year span, using a strange variety of methods. His victims were shot, smashed with a sledgehammer, and, of course, through the placement and detonation of car bombs on the unsuspecting. Dr. Engle maintained a successful dentistry practice during this period, through which he certainly made enough to maintain a lifestyle that didn't rely on these money-motivated killings, something that has continued to perplex forensic psychologists who have been charged with determining what exactly was the motivating factor that drove Glennon to commit such brutal slayings. During interviews, the dentist would admit to several of his crimes, but all involved in the ongoing investigations feel strongly that the likelihood that Glennon has been completely forthcoming about his deeds remains strongly in question. Among the most vile elements of Engelman's behavior was his manipulation of victims' families, using his uncanny abilities to connect with the partners of his victims and convincing them to run that same scam he had developed with his first wife. The dentist nearly always worked with a female accomplice on the inside, and it is said that Glennon had an almost hypnotic quality, capitalizing on his powers of coercion and sexual prowess to gain a measure of control over the women involved to a degree that they would become party to his unspeakable acts of callous greed. His methods were nearly always the same: gain the trust and loyalty of a woman and send her into the world like a black widow. These women would make sure that the insurance payout was as high as possible, and the heartless Glennon make sure that the target would meet their demise. While Engelman's murders seemed financially motivated, greed-induced expressions of sociopathy, there remains an elephant in the room. He didn't need this money. What broken character trait drove this man to plot and scheme and ultimately take the lives of his victims? With his brutal legacy revealed, one can only wonder what it would have been like to find yourself in his chair, perhaps never knowing that the man with his hands in your mouth has killed multiple times. Engelman, following his arrest and trial, was given 3 life sentences in the early 80s. It turned out that he only needed 1, as he died while incarcerated in March 1999 at the Jefferson City Correctional Institution as a result of diabetes. Unlike his victims, Glennon saw his time coming and is said to have been at peace when he passed. When Engelman was embarking on a life of dentistry and killing on the side, one can assume that he never was counting on Hollywood knowing, much less that there would be a film directly inspired by his twisted life. The Dentist saw its debut in 1996, 3 years before Engelman would meet his end. The film centers around Dr. Alan Feenstone, a seemingly mild-mannered dentist, just like Glennon himself, who would find himself sinking deeper into a violent and manipulative world of his own making. Unlike the real-life killer, the Brian Yuzna slasher film, clocking in at a tight 92 minutes, focuses more on a criminally violent response to betrayal and pain, rather than a cool and calculating serpent of a man who is motivated by money. The dentist in the film is a wounded man, deeply harmed by his wife's infidelity and his own inability to process this pain in a way that might serve him. Rather, he opts to become violent, a gross simplification of the actual story, but one that is nonetheless very entertaining. The film opens with Feenstone discovering that his wife has been cheating on him. This causes something to snap within the psyche of the dental professional, leading to a dizzying tale of paranoia, hallucinations, and a direct psychological meltdown revealed to the viewer in a series of disturbing dreamlike sequences. Among the reoccurring nightmarish visions Feenstone faces, mostly while his clients are in his chairs under anesthesia, awaiting procedures, are ones featuring horrible rotted teeth. Dream analysis is often considered when mental health professionals conduct a diagnostic workup for their patients, and this idea of teeth rotting and falling out is among the most reoccurring nightmares people face. Certainly an element of this ties directly to the finite quality of our existence, personified by our need to masticate, and woefully, we must maintain our adult teeth to survive. As such, these visions and dreams have come to many to present a metaphorical symbol for mortality and death. Unlike the story we know of the real-life killer, Feenstone takes advantage of his unconscious clients in a number of ways. In one scene, he violates a beauty queen in his chair. In another, during a psychedelic vision, he accidentally harms a young child. Later, he uses the compromised state of his victims to exact cruel revenge, removing teeth painfully, destroying otherwise healthy mouths, and in one instance, he even removes the tongue of one of his targets. The film closes with a dramatic twist. Feenstone, finally apprehended during the commission of a crime, is sentenced to serve his term in a psychiatric facility, deemed criminally insane by the courts. While on the confines of the state-run hospital, Feenstone, perhaps hallucinating, finds himself carted off to a routine dental procedure, only to find that his dentist is in fact a victim of his murderous ways, and now the tables have turned. While the character of Feenstone is quite different from the real-life counterpart, Engelman, the stories, according to some, do in fact intersect, perhaps in a rather unexpected way. In the film, many of the dentist's crimes are motivated by a perverse sexuality, expressing itself through violence and control over his patients. Similarly, the crimes committed by Engelman are said to share an underlying sexual motivation. Prosecutor in the Engelman trial, Gordon Acne, is quoted as saying, "He says he does it for money, but I think it's a front." He continues, "He never did it for enough to make it worthwhile." He related homicidal intimacy with sexual intimacy. There was almost a sexual excitement about killing. He's said to have quite a sexual drive. He has a very macho image of himself. While this is certainly present in the film, it is far less about raw sexual motivating factors and seems to address this more as a man betrayed, seeking to reclaim a potency that was lost during his wife's betrayal. The Dentist leans more into our medical fears and our connection to our teeth in a way that is purely Hollywood. And while it is unknown if the real-life dentist Glennon ever engaged in acts of revenge or such abuses while patients were in his office, it stands to reason that this is a very real possibility, one that will haunt our dreams. Have you ever feared the dentist? Maybe you will now. How about dreams of rotting and falling out teeth? Is this symbolic of death or just something terrifyingly real and strictly a concern worth having? Finally, what do you find more frightening? The thought of someone committing the ultimate sin of financial gain or for some sick sexual satisfaction? Let us know in the comments down below. Please be sure to like and subscribe to The Graveyard Shift, and, as always, check back next time to find out what else will make it from scream to screen.